All right, you know what time it is. Yeah, Neil Ratner Rock Doc here with a story. All right, so yesterday, March 1st, was the 46th anniversary of the release of Pink Floyd's iconic album, The Dark Side of the Moon. Now, as most of you know, my company, Circus Talents, participated in the production of the tour. And all that came about as a result of an old girlfriend from college, Putty Watts, whose husband just happened to be Peter Watts, chief sound technician for the Pink Floyd. All right, but more about that later. All right, the ideas for the album began in 1971 when the band gathered at Nick Mason's house to discuss their upcoming tour of Britain, Japan, and the U.S. Now, Roger Waters came up with the idea for an album that dealt with, as Roger put it, things that made people mad. Now, he also proposed that the album could be part of the tour. The songs would focus on the pressures faced by the band during their arduous lifestyle and dealing with the apparent mental problems suffered by former band member Syd Barrett. All right. Now, the 5 tracks on each side reflect various stages of human life, beginning and ending with a heartbeat, exploring the nature of the human experience, and, according to Waters, empathy. Speak to Me and Breathe together stress the mundane and futile elements of life that accompany the ever-present threat of madness and the importance of living one's own life. Don't be afraid to care. By shifting the scene to an airport, the synthesizer-driven instrumental On the Run evokes the stress and anxiety of modern travel, in particular, Richard Wright's fear of flying. And Time examines the manner in which its passage can control one's life and offers a stark warning to those who remain focused on mundane aspects. And it's followed by a retreat into solitude and withdrawal and Breathe. And the first side of the album ends with Right and great vocalist Claire Torrey's soulful metaphor for death, the great gig in the sky. Yeah, all right. Now, opening with the sound of cash registers and loose change, the first track on side 2, Money, mocks greed and consumerism using tongue-in-cheek lyrics and cash-related sound effects. Money, Us and Them, addresses the isolation of the depressed. Any Color You Like concerns the lack of choice in a human society. Brain Damage looks at mental illness resulting from the elevation of fame and success above the needs of self, in particular the line, and if the band you're in starts playing different tunes, which reflects the mental breakdown of former bandmate Syd Barrett. And the album ends with Eclipse, which forces the listener to recognize the common traits shared by humanity. Heavy stuff, huh? But brilliantly done. So the album was recorded at Abbey Road Studios in 2 sessions between May 1972 and January 1973. And in addition to the music, there are the voices heard between some of the tracks. And for that story, I'm going to read to you from my book, Rock Doc, which is available in all formats on Amazon. And if you would like an autographed copy, go to my website, neilratnerrockdoc.com. Go to the left-hand side, order the book there, and I'll autograph it any way you want. Now, the voices from the Dark Side of the Moon album. Okay, so Pink Floyd went into the Abbey Road Studios in January 73 to finish up the Dark Side of the Moon album, which led to a phone call from my good friend Peter Watts. All right, now, Peter invited me to come to the studio the following night. The band was finally mixing the album, and Roger Waters was planning to record anyone in the studio who was willing to answer a series of questions he had created. Now, Roger wanted a more human feeling to the record and thought people's spontaneous answers would give him just that. He initially planned to use the answers as a segue between songs, But as he mixed them into the recording, he realized what an integral part of the album they were. I was very excited and couldn't wait to go. But as fate would have it, instead of Abbey Road Studios, I ended up in the emergency room of a London hospital, writhing in pain with my first attack of what turned out to be kidney stones. All right. Now, Peter told me about the evening a few days later. Roger asked anyone and everyone present in the studio, including roadies, studio staff, and invited guests, to answer his questions. Paul and Linda McCartney showed up, but apparently their answers ended up on the cutting room floor, although their new guitar player, Henry McCullough, made it onto the record with the memorable lines, "I don't know, I was really drunk at that time." Now, roadie Chris Adamson opens the album with his line, "I've been mad for fucking years, absolutely years." And my friends Peter and Putty are very well represented. Peter contributed the repeated laughter during Brain Damage and Speak to Me, and Putty can be heard saying, "The geezer is cruising for a bruising," used in the segue between Money and Us and Them, and her words, "I never said I was afraid of dying," are heard halfway through The Great Gig in the Sky. Maybe the best lines came from Abbey Road's big Irish doorman, Jerry O'Driscoll. Among them were, "I'm not frightened of dying. Any time will do, I don't mind. Why should I be frightened of dying? There's no reason for it. You've got to go sometime." And of course, his words at the very end of the album, "There is no dark side of the moon, really. As a matter of fact, it's all dark." Well, what can you say? I wish I would have been there. Never happened. But, as I said, shortly after that, a couple weeks later, Peter spoke to Floyd's manager, Steve O'Rourke, about my company combining forces with the Floyd, and in March 1973, my company joined the Dark Side of the Moon tour. Now, none of us then had any idea what the Dark Side of the Moon would become in the history of rock and roll, but we all knew we were part of something special. I'm going to close with what Richard Wright had to say about the experience. "It changed me in many ways because it brought a lot of money and one feels very secure when you can sell an album for 2 years. But it hasn't changed my attitude to music. Even though it was so successful, it was made in the same way as all our other albums. And the only criteria we have about releasing music is whether we like it or not. It was not a deliberate attempt to make a commercial album. It just happened that way. We knew it had a lot more melody than previous Floyd albums, and there was a concept that ran through it. The music was easier to absorb, and having girls singing away added a commercial touch that none of our records had." All right, Dark Side of the Moon, iconic, an album for all times. All right, so that's my story. I hope you enjoyed it. I'll have another story for you tomorrow. I'm going to tell you a little about George Harrison's early days in his first trip to the U.S., which you might not know about. All right, so that's it. Wherever you are, have a great weekend. I hope you'll join me tomorrow for another story. If you haven't already done it, buy the book. It's got a lot of great stories in it. You can buy it on Amazon, on my website. That's it for today. All right. Neil Ratner Rock Doc signing off for now. Have a great day, and I'll see you tomorrow for another great story. All right now. Bye.